Hey y'all, today's video is episode 2 of The Great Divide. Is there any hope? I'm going to be doing this video every Monday. And if you don't know what this video is about, I would encourage you to go and look at episode 1. But basically, this is a hope for reconciliation. I am seeing how much division we have in general, but what's really hit home with me is this divide between the generations, because I've experienced firsthand what that is and what that looks like, and how bad it's become. And it's become really, really, like, it's become an issue. Again, look at the intro video if you want some more information on that, but it's become almost like an issue. Or almost, no. It's definitely an issue. And my heart, God's heart, is that there is reconciliation in this situation. So I'm gonna get into the topic pretty soon, but if it wasn't clear in my last video, I said that my introduction to this issue was actually hearing from a parent, from the parent's perspective, and I kind of had a bias towards them. But as I experienced it myself, I realized, okay, so we both actually have things to learn. Like with most things, our way of looking at things, our carnal view, is going to leave room for error. We are in error when we think otherwise. So saying one side is all right and the other is all wrong, you've already lost the plot. You've already missed it. That can be the way the world looks at things, but that's not the way us children of God will look at things, because that's not God's mind, and that's what we're really here for. That's what we really need to consider. So, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord that he cares about us so much to really try and reconcile us when there's problems. And I don't just mean parent versus child or anything like that, but in general. Because as I mentioned in the first video, one of the biggest issues with this situation isn't even the offenses themselves. Like, my parent did this, my child did this, isn't even that. It's the fact that people nowadays, you can find so much validation with whatever your side of things is, that people are doubling down on how they feel and how they think and all this kind of stuff, leaving no room for reconciliation. And I see it just as much. If you think it's just a younger person hang up, it's not. Maybe more so, but from my view, it's just as much on the Gen Z, millennial, Gen X, whatever side as it is on the baby boomer side. I'm appalled by how many people are like forming little communities talking about this stuff and really just being just wow. Just a lot of it has demonic influence too, by the way, that you would just sit there and talk so horribly about people and wish like just insane stuff that I'm like, oh my God, our moral compass is completely messed up. But anyways, I digress. So this is an issue on both sides, and this is why I'm here. This has been a prayer on my heart for a while, and I've seized the opportunity that the Lord has given, the grace that he's given for me to speak on this. So this is what this is for. And if anyone has any comments, suggestions, concerns, or anything, please feel free to share them. I will pray about them and potentially talk about a topic if there's anything that anyone has a interest in or consideration or whatever the case is. Anyways, Today's topic specifically is going to be about the spiritual role of a child, of a parent, and what that relationship should look like from a from God's perspective, from a spiritual lens, because we have a lot of ideas of what it looks like that's been shaped by culture and the past and all this kind of stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of this has been things that have been passed down without consideration for the God, for God, sorry, the God, that sounded weird, for God in handling these situations, handling what it is, handling the role of being a parent, handling the role of um, being a child. Although that's not as, it's a little bit different with the children, but I'll get into that in a minute. Um, just like a quick little thought, I just thought about this, that nowadays people around my age, like Gen Z, millennials, are saying we're not having children, we're not doing it. And I've heard like older people complaining about that, saying, you guys are so selfish, blah blah blah, you don't want to do what we had to do. To be honest, if you could see things from a spiritual lens, how weighty a lot of things are. If you don't know, like, even though we live in the natural world, we don't live in the spiritual world, obviously. A lot of our life is spiritual. A lot of our life is spiritual. What do I mean by that? I don't know if I want to get into this right here, right now, but a lot of what you experience, if not, no, not a lot of, most of what you experience, majority of what you experience, 90% plus of what you experience in this realm, in this life, is because of something that happened in the spirit or didn't happen in the spirit, however you want to look at that. So, this is why being in alignment with the Lord is so important and so good, because it will affect your natural life in a way that nothing else ever could. You will avoid situations. You will be prepared for situations. You'll have a knowledge of how to execute this, how to, like, it is the best thing for you to be in alignment with God's purposes for your life, with what God is speaking over your life. Best thing you can ever, ever, ever do for yourself. I'm telling you. And He wants that for you. He doesn't want you to be caught by surprise. When someone like has a tragedy, an unforeseen tragedy, or I guess it doesn't have to be a tragedy, but like an unforeseen event, whatever it looks like. Do you know that if you're in alignment with God and His purposes, He's going to actually let you know what's going to happen? You're not going to be thrown off. You're not going to be high and dry, just like, well, now what do I do? That doesn't happen when you're in alignment with God and His purposes. He will let you know. Now, your ability to actually pick up what He said, that's different. But He will let you know to either avoid it, pray against it, fight against it, or whatever needs to happen. Prepare for it, whatever. So, telling you, man, this is the best thing you can do for yourself. Anyways, there are people saying like they're not going to have children and all this kind of stuff. And people making like, not like, being disgruntled towards them, older people being disgruntled towards them. And I'm like, actually, it's real what they're saying. I would rather someone realize, man, it's a lot of responsibility to have a child and opt not to, than to just be like, oh, I just want a baby, and then not be able to handle it or neglect them in certain areas. So I honestly commend the younger folks on that one, that they can really understand that it's a lot of weight, it's a lot of pressure. And um, if I think if people who've had children are honest, they'll say, yeah, there's some times that it was like, this is more than I can handle. Um, and I'll circle back to that point in a minute, but just had to throw that out there. But anyway, so the biblical spiritual roles of child, parent, and what that relationship should look like according to God. If I have time, I'll talk about a revelation that the Lord gave me about this situation, like this division, but I don't know if I'm going to have time. So anyways, I'll start out with if any of you have seen my video where I talk about, I think the title of it is something like the role that gender plays in the spirit. If you don't know, even your gender has a specific criteria that comes with it spiritually, I suppose. I don't know if that's quite the right word, but there's if you're a woman, there are certain graces afforded to you. If you're a man, there are certain graces afforded to you. For instance, wisdom with women, intuition with women. Those are gifts inherent to our being. That's a natural grace that the Lord has allowed for women to have. Not that there's not wise men, not that there's not intuitive men, but more often than not, wisdom follows women. Wisdom in the Bible is personified typically as a woman. Intuition follows women. It's just a grace that we've been given. Men have their own graces. Just as it's like that with gender, it's like that with pretty much every aspect of your being. Everything from the time that you were born to where you were born, where you grew up, all that kind of stuff, as well as situational considerations. You being a parent, you not being a parent, you being married, you not being married, you being married young in life, you being married older in life. Everything is so divinely orchestrated. This is why, going back to the point, I didn't think I was gonna talk this much about it, but being in alignment with God's plan for you is the best thing you can do because He is writing the story of your life. You're not. You think that you are, but you're not. But I digress. Anyways, so there is I guess a mandate or a grace or considerations that come with whatever role you take in this world, right? And being a parent is one of those. Obviously, we're all children, so that's just a given, right? We're all somebody's child. The role of a child is that of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a specific word I'm looking for. A recipient. A recipient. I guess just simply a recipient. Just like how it is between us and God. We are a recipient of His grace, of His mercy, of His love, all this kind of stuff. That is our role. We can't give it. We can't be on equal ground with Him as far as like giving it to other people, giving it to ourselves, giving it to Him. Like that doesn't work, right? We're recipients. Whatever He has for us, we're recipients. It's the same thing with the role of a child spiritually. If you have a child who thinks that they're on equal playing field with their parent or above, God forbid, know that they might have some demonic afflictions going on. Like real talk. I'm not trying to be like weird or funny or anything like that. Like there are some children who are like kind of naturally have this rebellious streak or seemingly naturally. you're most likely dealing with a spirit in that case. And I'm not talking about the teenage rebellion years. I'm not talking about that. And I'm not talking about terrible twos either. I'm talking about, like, a little 5-year-old who thinks that they can run the show. That's a problem. So a child is supposed to be a recipient of, hopefully, the good, but it will actually be the good and the bad. Whatever that parent is, was, continues to be, that child up till a certain age is supposed to be a recipient of that. The wisdom, their faults, their virtues, all that kind of stuff. And once they get to be a certain age, they won't ever stop, being a recipient of that. Parents are seen as a covering, children are seen as the covered, or like a vessel. I think that's really the word that I like, vessel. They're to be seen as a vessel, and that never stops, but obviously as they get older, that is going to change, or it should change for the benefit of the child. It should change. I'm going to see if the Lord's going to have me talk about the, like, rebellious teenagers a little bit, because that's its own animal. I don't know. That might be its own video, to be honest. But I'll come back to it if he speaks to me on that. So, anyways, that is the child's role. Always, always, always. This means even if your parent is dealing you something negative, something wrong, spiritually, they're still your covering. Now, I'm not, please don't misunderstand that to say, like, oh yeah, I want people to stay in their situations if their parent was abusive. No, 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 no. I pray that they can get out of those situations. But I'm just saying, the Lord, or from a spiritual perspective, from the Lord's perspective, you are a recipient of whatever your parent is, was, wasn't, whatever. In negative situations like that, obviously their parent is showing them, like abusive situations, their parent is showing them how not to be. Unfortunately, that could be really difficult when you get a little bit older and it's like, okay, but now how do I be? But that is the way in which a child of a certain age, I will say, should look at their parent, that you're a recipient. I say of a certain age because when you're really young, you're not gonna, like, you're just living, right? You're not thinking about all this kind of stuff. You're just being you. Thank you, Jesus. But that is the role of a child, to receive lessons, good, bad, whatever. Recipient. Now, does that mean that the child can't also give? No, that doesn't mean that at all. That does not mean that at all. It's just their place is not to do that. It's not, trying to think of a practical example of that, but I just wanted to throw that out there just in case someone kind of takes it to mean, like, okay, you just have to obey, you don't have a place to say anything. If you talk to your child like that, they're never going to be able to grow and learn and think on their own. And this is a little bit of the issue with the older school way of looking at things. Children are to be seen, not to be heard. Yeah, well, if you don't foster communication with your child, that's actually an area where you've just neglected them. No, they need to be shown. especially if you can do better. Definitely in that case. But anyways, I digress. So, it's not the child's place or responsibility to think that they need to, like, I don't know, tell their parents how to run things, whatever the case is. That's dishonoring. That's dishonoring of the position that the parent has been given, sorry, as a covering. And that's dangerous. Disrespecting your parents, not recognizing them as a covering is dangerous. You will come into spiritual issues, spiritual afflictions, when you do not honor your parents. I don't know if I need to talk more on that. Hold on. Okay. What does honoring your parents look like? Because this is kind of something that people don't really understand on either side of it. People in the past kind of thought that that meant children are to be seen, not to be heard. You just do whatever I tell you. That's not honoring. That's not what it is to honor. Even God doesn't treat us that way. I need you to realize that even God doesn't treat us that way. He's more than okay with listening to you, hearing how you think, how you feel, all that kind of stuff, with coming into communion with you, meeting you where you're at. Honoring, how the Holy Spirit showed me, is respect the position that they've been given, that they've been, given by God. Respect their ordained godly position as your covering. One person said it in this really beautiful way. It's like, you may like the president or not like the president, but you still would refer to him as president. If you were to go to the White House, you would still dress up nice, all this kind of stuff. You still have a reverence for the role that the president has, carries, whatever. It's the same thing with the parents. You may disagree. They may be completely wrong. There is still a level of respect and honor that is required of you. Now, once the child gets to a certain age, this does kind of look a little bit different. You still need to walk in honor. And by the way, if you don't walk in honor, so the promise that the Lord gives if you walk in honor is that you will live a long life. The opposite is also true. If you do not walk in honor, you're done. The enemy can actually use that against you. Because you've just violated a spiritual principle. So much of life is spiritual. You don't understand. Oh, anyways, you need to walk in honor. You need to have a level of respect, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of stuff. Now, this gets a little bit tricky when we're talking about children of a certain age, like past 18, and especially if the Lord is instructing them, because how it works, because parents are a covering, and I'm going to talk about their role in a second, God will not intervene. Like, even if he has like some divine plan for the child, he will not intervene until that child becomes a certain age. He won't do it. That would cause way too much chaos and controversy and all that kind of stuff. I'm telling you to do this. Well, God told me, like, it just, no. This is why he delegates a level of power to the parents. This is why he delegates a level of power to a husband, to a wife over her children, that kind of a thing. Because it can you can have a lot of division when one person is really devoted to serving the Lord and the other isn't. It can cause a lot of division. Now, I think I kind of want to make this a separate video because I know this is something that I'm not alone with when it comes to Christian children and struggling to walk in honor, especially when the Lord is speaking to you and your parent isn't like aware of that or doesn't want to accept that or whatever the case is. So I think I'm going to make that its own little video. I'm going to try and keep this to 30 minutes. So I will talk about the role of a parent and hopefully what that relationship should look like. So the spiritual role of a parent is that of a covering. Just like, I don't think I mentioned, the biblical hierarchy in a family should look like God over everything. Husband under God. God is the head of man. This is talked about in, I think it's like one of the Corinthians books, I think. God is the covering of man. Man is the covering of woman. Woman is the covering of the children. And if the Lord has me speak on that, I will also talk about what that looks like, because a lot of people misunderstand that and say, oh, so, a woman can only be this, or, a man just makes all the decisions. No. You're understanding it with carnal understanding, or you're not understanding it, actually. You're looking at it with carnal understanding. Just in the same way God wants to commune with us, that's his hope, his vision, his desire for husband, wife, parent, child, all that kind of stuff. He is not, even though he's in charge, even though his purposes will be made known, he is not so like tyrannical that it's just like, nope, my way or the highway. He's a gentleman. He will make sure you're ready to partner with him. You can't partner with someone who's not ready, right? But that's what he wants. That's what being in communion with him is. It says in, I believe, John 15, that he needs to dwell in us, but we also in him. He wants it to be a two-way thing. This idea that it's just, like, I don't know, like I'm just over you, like, it's carnal understanding. You got to get rid of that. That's not how he looks at people. So anyways, the spiritual roles of parents is a covering. What do I mean by this? That means that you are, in relation to your child, you are their source. 100%, fully and completely. And going back to my little thing about younger people not wanting to have kids, I get it. Like, that is a lot to take on. I believe that our society has kind of romanticized having children and just had every view of having children other than what God actually ordained. People back in the day would have children just because they had so many children, they needed help raising their children. People back in the day would have children because they needed help on the farm. People back in the day would have children because they needed someone to go to work. People did what they had to do. And I'm not saying that that was a sin, but I'm saying that that is not in alignment with the purposes that God has for the role of a child, for the role of you as the parent. And you're going to run into issues. You are going to run into issues. By the way, in case it isn't known, estrangement is not new. It's just become more of a thing. People are more vocal about it. Estrangement has been around for a while. And from what I have studied about this topic, what would happen in the past is people would just move away. People would just marry, move away, whatever. And it was just, I don't really talk to my family. And that was their version of going low contact, no contact. It wasn't so in your face, which makes sense because also communication is a lot more in our face nowadays anyways. But back in the day, that's what people would do. they'd want to get far away and just cut ties and whatever the case is. So this is not new. We need to make that very, very clear. And in fact, it probably was a little bit harsher then, because you may never, ever hear from that person again, you know? And you live and die with that anger, that bitterness, or whatever the case is. I don't know. So you are 100% their source if you're a parent. That means that whatever that child needs, whatever that child needs, all aspects of their being, you need to be able to provide it. And if you can't provide it, you need to either learn how to or find someone who can. And you might be like, what the heck? You know, I was listening to a therapist talking about, there's just too much. It was, like I said, I was doing research on this topic, and Oprah did a thing on this whole situation, and she had 3 therapists, psychologists, talking about the situation. And one of them was he seemed to have a bias towards the parents. I'll just put it that way. Seemed to anyways. Because I remember him saying something like, there's just so much pressure on parents nowadays. Now you got to be an expert in disabilities, and you got to do this and you got to do that and be able to. And I get it. I 100% get it. Life has become very complicated. It has. But I just would point out to that guy that that's actually always how it should have been. It's just we've been so okay with neglecting people in certain areas, because most of us, our parents were neglected in certain areas and their parents were neglected in certain areas, that it's like, well, it was good enough for me, so it's going to be good enough for you type of mentality. That is what is considered an evil mindset when you think like that. I have a whole video on that. If God has shown you a better way, if he has brought you to a place of privilege where you have information that previous generations didn't, and you refuse to do better, you are evil in the sight of God. I'm sorry. That's not my words. That's how he views it. The verse coming to mind, I think it's like Matthew, good God, what is it? Matthew 6. Let's see if I can find it really quick, because I need to end this. Give me a second. I think it's like Matthew 6 something. I don't remember where it's found. It might be 7, actually. Okay, I'm not sure where it's found, but it's the verse that talks about how many of you, if your son would ask for bread, would you give a stone? Ask for a fish, would you give a snake? You who are evil know how to give good gifts. How much more your heavenly Father? And every time I read past that, I'm like, evil? Dang, that's so harsh. Yes. In case you didn't know, God doesn't consider us good. We're not. We're absolutely not good. When you know his goodness, you'll realize how faulty we are. We're not good. We're evil. Every single one of us. Some more than others, but yeah, nah. The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, y'all. But anyways, so he sees that as evil, and there's unfortunately parents who see no problem with that. A lot of parents actually commonly say things like, well, it was like that for me, so it'll be like that for them. I actually had my mom say something very similar to me, and it just broke me. Like, you can't be serious. Some people either, I don't know, whether they can't see that there can be better, or are lazy, or whatever the case is, they just jealous. Some parents are actually jealous of their children, as sad as that is. But anyways, I digress. So trying to wrap this up real quick. What was I saying? If the Lord has shown you better, you need to do better. And we all in this 21st century, in the year 2026, the year of our Lord, okay, we can all do better. We all have so much more information than we've ever had available to us. We can all do so much better. And it is by God's hand and his grace that he wants to bring restoration in areas that there have been generations of trauma, issues, all this kind of stuff that have just gone unaccounted for. I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say, because people didn't have the language. But now we're privileged to have that language. And anyone who resists that, know that they're afflicted. But I'll get into that later. They're definitely afflicted. Why would you resist doing better for yourself on a personal note, in the sight of God, and for your children? Anyways, so you as a parent are a covering. You are meant to 100% provide their needs in whatever way that looks like. Some children need more consideration, some need less. All of them need certain basic stuff. Right now, there's a lot more emphasis on the mental and emotional. And while I can understand why that could seem very overwhelming, think about yourself. This is what I think I'll end it on. Think about yourself for a second. There are parents who will say, oh, well, you've got a roof over your head, you got food to eat, you're good. Are you good with your husband, or maybe you don't have a husband, or your wife, whatever? Normally this is something that wives are more aware of. Are you good just with the house that maybe he provided, you guys bought together, whatever, and just, a little bit of affection here and there? No, you're not. You want to be heard. You want to feel special. Maybe there's a level of intellectual stimulation that you need, emotional consideration that you need. And relationships die when one party just gives up, just refuses to acknowledge this kind of stuff. So all I can tell you is that your child is a adult in training and their own entity. And you as their covering, you have to be willing to provide. If you're not willing, that is considered evil to the Lord, and you will have to answer for that. I'm not saying it's necessarily that, like, oh, you're going to go to the pit. Like, I'm not saying that at all. He can still very much have mercy on you, but you've made an error, a great error in the sight of God, because that child didn't ask to be born. That child didn't ask for, whatever the situation is. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think that there is a lack of understanding of our roles, especially nowadays, with children more so, that they don't have a clear idea that, no, you need to respect, you need to honor your parents. There's a role that you play as the child, and you need to be respectful of that. You need to be aware of that. If you're not, you are going to bring a curse upon you. See, if the parent messes up, they may or may not bring a curse upon themselves. They will still have to answer for it, but they might not. It's a gamble. Depends on how they mess up, if it's like willful or whatever the case is. But like abuse, yeah, you can definitely bring a curse upon yourself. But if a child messes up, in the realm of honor, curse. 100%. Unless the Lord is just very merciful with you. If the Lord is merciful with you, he will try and correct you, put you on the right path, you know. But for people that the Lord doesn't really have his hand on as much, yeah, a lot of youth are taken out because spiritually, how it's seen is like, oh, you dishonor your parent? You wish they were unalive? I don't know if I can say that word. You know, cursing them out and stuff like that. Okay. You know, demons are like, yeah, it's our time. So it's not something really to play around with. But yes, role of a child recipient, role of a parent, the covering. Now, I will just address this really quickly. I know that there's parents who will probably say, well, I did the best that I could, blah, blah, blah. I did better than what I had, blah, blah, blah. One issue with that is that when we're doing things with our own effort, we're never really doing the best that we can. Us who know better, us who know to lean on the Lord. Now, we're all going to make mistakes, and that's fine. But you can't think, well, I just did the best that I can, so I'm really not at fault here, or something like that. And I see people who take that kind of mentality, and it's flawed. Yes, the Lord has given you a certain amount of jurisdiction to raise that child however you want. But if there's an area where you've neglected them, and keeping with the theme of this kind of situation, this topic, that we're looking at emotionally and mentally, because we didn't even have the language for this, for emotional and mental consideration. Really, it's become more popular within the past, 10 years, if that even. If there are areas, okay, let me put it this way. If you have that kind of mentality in general, it doesn't have to be the parent thing, whatever. I guarantee you there's probably areas that you haven't considered where you've gotten things wrong. The disposition I like to take is, I know that there's always better that I can be, even in the areas that I'm decent in. When you start to think, well, I've done everything I could do. Now, there is such a thing as you doing everything that you can do. If you can honestly say that before the Lord, and you know you have leaned on the Lord with all your understanding, this isn't for you. This part of the video isn't for you. But there's a lot of parents who will say that, and they'll use the measurement of how they were raised and say, well, it was better than what I had, so it was good enough. And it's like, so if you think like that, you're projecting, whether you realize it or not. You're not aware that you can't tell this is an entirely different entity. This child is an entirely different person who has needs independent of what you had or didn't have. In the same way that if you didn't have stuff growing up and it's like, well, this is just how it is, that is also considered an evil mindset before the Lord, if you know to do better. Obviously, if you don't know, there's a little bit of grace there, but if you do know to do better, and what is knowing to do better? Doesn't mean being an expert on every situation or anything like that. No, it means leaning. But what is the verse? Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him. Even the things you think you're doing right. Lord, how can I be better? That's the kind of mentality he wants for his people. That's the kind of humility where you can grow and grow and grow. And this is also just on a personal relationship with the Lord. That is what he loves. He loves. He will have so much for you if you have that kind of mentality. And the more you lean into that, the more you realize how flawed you are, and you won't even want to lean on your own understanding. It's like, well, better not do that. So, I know that there's parents who kind of think like that, and that could be very true for some parents, and their children still went wayward or whatever the case is. I get you. I'm talking for parents who know they have a litany of mistakes because they weren't leaning on the Lord, or they were half leaning on the Lord. That doesn't exist. There is no... You're either a servant or you're not. You're not a half servant. If you're a half servant, you're not a servant of the Lord. So we need to know that. We need to understand that. So anyways, spiritual covering, spiritual recipient. Let me see if there's anything else I need to share. And this dynamic still follows you even when you're past 18, when you're an adult, whatever. It will change, and it depends on your circumstances. It depends on your situation. Is your parent a follower of Christ or not? Are you a follower of Christ or not? Whatever. It kind of depends, but you don't just turn 18 and then, oh, don't need you anymore. And 18-year-olds fall for that pride. I remember it very well. We fall for that pride that we think we know everything. We do, absolutely. And it's flawed and it's wrong. So, and parents are still needed. Parents, you're still very much needed. I've actually seen it also where parents are like, oh, you're 18, you're good, you don't need me anymore. Like, I'm gonna go live the life I always actually wanted to live. Like, oh, what? You're just gonna cut them loose like that? Yes, there are parents who actually operate like that. And I'm like, wow, you're gonna have to answer for that. So, covering is source. Covering is what God is to all of us. But, when you're a child, He delegates that role more to your parents. When you are a wife, He delegates that role more to the husband. But covering. And the beautiful thing, what this can look like when that understanding of these roles is understood, I'm sorry I'm going over time so much, is that everything will work in perfect harmony. A child who understands that they are a recipient of whatever their parent has. And again, I'm talking about slightly older children, at least like, I don't know, maybe double digits or so. They won't think that they're running the show. They won't be disobedient. They'll understand, nope, I'm here to learn from my parent all that I can, the good and the bad. Now, it's a little bit tricky because kids don't obviously have that level of like maturity typically. They're just living life, right? So this is something that if I were to have kids, or that I would be teaching them. That's your role. That's your area. And if the parent understands their jurisdiction, they won't take on too much or too little, neglect their children in certain areas, or try and take on too much. When I say you're supposed to be the source for their needs, I'm not saying give them anything and everything that they want. I'm not saying that at all. Their actual needs to function as a human being and to help them grow and all that, that is your jurisdiction. Their wants, if you can and desire to, and won't spoil your child, great. Otherwise, you know, because the role of a parent is a lot. People say it's a full-time job, and it is. No breaks, no days off, blah, blah, blah. Parents, I think, are a little bit overwhelmed with that too, because things have shifted so almost rapidly within the past, like, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so, like within my lifetime, I think. And I honestly feel like some of them don't know where to stand. They don't know what to do. And I don't mean that as an insult or a put down. It's just like, what do we do? Children don't even know either. And that's why some of them are trying to mouth off and tell their parents what to do and all this kind of stuff, and just no respect and all this nonsense. You will take on more if you don't know your jurisdiction. When I said the thing about you are their source, and if you can't provide them something in a certain area, you need to find someone who does. There are certain things that you may not be that good at, that you know someone who's way better at. If possible, ask that person to be a mentor now more than ever, because we don't have that whole it takes a village type thing going on in most places in America nowadays. We don't have that. Communities aren't as strong as they once were. It used to be back in the day that, yes, you had your parents, but people were a lot more on one accord, and you also would have your communities to back you. Whether it be your church or whatever the situation was, some club, whatever. Now we're not seeing that as much. At least I'm not. So now more than ever, it is good to have like a mentor figure, especially for like single parents. Have a mentor figure for your child. It's actually vital for a single parent. You should not take on everything. You cannot take on everything. If there are areas where okay, I can educate myself on this so I can be better for my child, great. But oh my gosh, no. Seek out resources, help them with what they need, but don't you yourself take it on. Parents, two-parent household, you have each other, so it's a little bit different. There's not as much of a need for that mentorship, but who knows? Maybe you're good parents, but that, I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. That there's some area that, I don't know, your child's interested in, or, like maybe they're advanced with education or something like that. And it might be above your pay grade or too much to add to your plate or whatever the case is. Don't just, they'll figure it out. No. That's a need for them, and a God ordained gift that they've been given, if that's the case, that they have been given like a measure of intellect that should be fostered. It should be. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. But all I'm saying is, like, a lot of times we'll just be like, whatever, towards people in general. And no. That's not right, especially if you're their covering, and you will have to answer for that. In the areas that you were not there for your children, you will have to answer, because you did not do things. You did not lean on, in all your ways. You did not lean on the Lord. And the thing is, you might think, well, that just sounds so complicated. That sounds like, eh. Actually, it's going to give you the most rest because he's going to highlight exactly the problem and exactly how it needs to be handled. You don't have to guess. You don't have to do A through Z to figure it out. No, 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 no. Actually, he may not highlight exactly how to solve the problem. Most likely he will, but he may not. He may just highlight the problem in a way that he'll give you the insight to know how to execute, if that makes sense. How to handle the solution. It's like, oh, I was thinking it was behavior issue, but actually, the Lord gave me a dream, and I actually think my child is being afflicted, or I think that my child just needs a little more attention, or something like that. By the way, with misbehavior, that is most often the case. They need attention. But anyways, um, and then now you know how to act accordingly. So I'm gonna stop. I'm sorry this went so much over the time. I try to stick to 30 minutes, but it's an hour. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this helps someone. I hope you understand spiritual role of a child, the covered, the recipient, the parent, source. Um, and I hope this helps. Um, if you liked it, comment, like, subscribe, whatever. If you didn't like it, comment, like, subscribe. If you have any questions or anything, if something I said wasn't clear, go ahead and let me know. And I'll try to do my best to answer it if the Lord leads me to. So, God bless you all. Have a good day.